Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hotflash Inc podcast. I wanted to let you know that the Hotflash Inc Summit was a really big success. I wasn't sure what would happen, but we had 3,500 plus people sign up. Lots of people commenting and saying they liked the sessions. And I was just so pleased because there wasn't anyone in there promoting fear. As a friend said to me yesterday, it was so great when all this awareness started because you felt like, oh, someone's actually listening to us. And then it very quickly got like extremely restrictive and fear mongering. And it's not really fun right now to be a midlife woman because wherever you turn, we need something else. I saw someone yesterday, a doctor who'd paired up with the telehealth company saying she thought every woman should be on GLP-1s. And she wasn't talking about full doses. She was saying maybe microdosing, but that's a really bold statement. There's a lot we don't know about those. And if you're on them or you want to be on them, that's fine. I have friends who are on them, but everyone? Huh. Anyway, now I have created, so if you want the Hot Flash Inc. Summit and you missed out on seeing it, there is an all access pass you can buy. There's a link in the show notes, and you can go and check out all those videos and have them at your leisure. You will also get you'll also get the Hot Flash Inc. Summit Book of Knowledge, which is just a whole bunch of takeaways and highlights of the interviews plus resources that came out of the summit. And you also get the beta version of my Hot Flash Inc. Hormone Therapy Navigator, which is a tool that I created just to help you understand how many crazy different kinds of hormone therapy there are there. It's wild. And speaking of all that, I have created my first course. It's called the Perimenopause Game Plan, and it's a 6-week course that I'm going to teach live starting November 8th. It will run from November 8th to December 13th. It's going to break down all of this without getting you in the weeds. I struggled so much not knowing I was in perimenopause, but I think nowadays, it really depends where you end up and who you get an appointment with. And then you're going to go down a certain road and maybe you'll be getting all this testing and you're trusting your doctor to tell you what your hormone levels are. Maybe you want to decide that how you feel for yourself. Maybe you don't really understand why everyone says lifestyle. Maybe you weren't ever really connected with your monthly cycle. A lot of us weren't. And maybe you don't understand what people are just throwing words around like cortisol. And I have just broken it down. And like I said, without getting into the weeds, I've been researching this all, and I can tell you, obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving medical advice. I can tell you, this is what these people do. This is what these people do. If you go to this kind of a doctor, you're going to get really high levels of hormone therapy and cycling for the rest of your life. If you go to this kind of a doctor, they do a sort of precision medicine. If you go to a naturopath, you're going to get probably compounded hormones. And then there are all these modalities, oh, so many that don't use hormones at all. And women do really, really well in them. And they're very valid, like homeopathy, which I used, and Ayurveda, and the list goes on. So all the information for the perimenopause game plan is going to be in the show notes. You can sign up for it now. We're going to create a really cool community. And let's get on to today's guest. This is actually a very interesting day because it's the first day I've ever had another journalist on. I can't believe it. I've thought about having other journalists on, but to be honest, a lot of the other journalists in this space tried hormone therapy, were transformed by it, and then that's sort of the only angle that they can cover. And that hasn't been very interesting to me. So that's why I've never had a journalist on yet. Fiona Clark, who is my guest today, is an award-winning journalist, broadcaster, and women's health advocate. She's also author of the new book, Meno Wars: Why Menopause Is Moment Has Gone Horribly Wrong. She looks at how media, medicine, and marketing have shaped today's menopause narrative. She's also co-founder of the Menopause Research and Education Fund, which is dedicated to bringing better science, education, and equity to women's health. And that's a really cool organization with a couple of partners, including Dr. Vikram Talalekar, who's on the Hot Flash Inc. expert panel. I really appreciate Fiona's approach to this subject, and she's going to walk us through some of the minefields that have emerged since she entered the scene, which was around 2017, 2018, which is a little bit before me.
I'm Ann Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy. Hotflash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Ann Marie.
Hi, Fiona. This is so exciting. You're my first journalist to be on the Hotflash Inc podcast.
Oh, that is exciting.
It is.
Wow. And I'll tell you from my side of the chair, it's really different. It's very different to answer questions than it is to ask them. It's actually quite hard and it's tiring.
Yeah, and I used to think that when I was interviewing people, I used to think, oh, geez, I would never want to do this. And if I did it, poor them, I would be second guessing everything after, and I'd want to phone the reporter and like correct things. And so thank goodness we're doing it when we're older, where it's easier a little bit, but it still is a bit confronting, I find. And
Yeah, it is.
tiring.
It is.
You really nailed it with tiring. Like there's a mental fatigue that comes after you've sort of had a conversation. So yeah.
Yep. Yep. Especially if if they're very, very long. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know I could actually talk for that
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to Joe Rogan you for 3 hours. Don't worry. But I am very excited because you've written this book, Meno Wars, Why Menopause Is Moment Has Gone Horribly Wrong. And as someone, I don't know, when did you get involved in this menopause conversation? You've been a health journalist for a long time, but when did you sort of get in this?
Probably about 2018, 2019. So 7 or so years ago now. And over that period of time, the landscape has dramatically changed.
Yeah, there was kind of a wave. Like there was kind of a wave that began then. I think when all of us started to go through, we're in perimenopause, started to realize there were a lot of celebrities. The doctors realized, and it feels like that wave has sort of carried through. And then we've watched some people crescendo. So I don't even know where to start, really. I guess I might start by saying, what was your own perimenopause like?
Actually, in all honesty, it wasn't that bad. It was, although my husband may completely disagree. Mood was my biggest issue, and unfortunately, I'm not necessarily known for my tolerance at the best of times. So I was way more snappy than usual. And then what was really worse for me was actually after menopause, and that was when the vaginal symptoms struck. I got to a point where I could barely sit, I could barely walk.
Oh,
Having sex was incredibly painful, and that kind of led me to really sort of question everything about myself in a way, which is a very, I know it sounds very sort of strange, but I got to the point. I remember I was sitting on the bed, and I talk about it in the book. I was sitting on the bed in the bedroom, and I burst into tears because I was sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, is this it? Everything's gone south. I look like hell. I can't concentrate. I'm moody, and now I can't even have sex. I can't have kids. What's the point? Why am I here?" But then I sort of came to a point where I reconciled with this, and that's where I know this is mildly philosophical. But I thought maybe that's what the good menopause is when you've sort of reconciled with yourself. You've come to the point that, okay, well, this is me now. And I still have a good 30, 40 years in front of me of living, and I'm going to make the most of it, health permitting.
well, I don't blame you because when your vagina feels off or that bad, it's just literally no way to carry on with your day. It's there every
Yeah,
second. Yeah, I hate when it's sort of,
yeah.
we're not parts, and that's the center of our body. So, how did you address those issues?
Um, After a lot of mistake making, because I did anatomy and physiology at university and spent 20 years after I left public broadcasting and medical publications, I thought I was a bit of a smarty pants, really. I thought that I knew everything about my own body, but clearly I didn't. So I kept on thinking that this was the beginning of another bit of thrush. And so I was literally living on Caniston. And the chemist said to me one day, you've really got to go and get that looked at. And I was like, I think I know my own body, only to find out that I had absolutely no idea. So eventually somebody said to me, you need a bit of vaginal estrogen to top up your HRT, or MHT as they call it in the rest of the world. And so I got hold of that. Initially, what's worse though is somebody had actually suggested this to me 3 or 4 years earlier. And I was indignant. I was like, I don't need that. And that was a big mistake because clearly I did.
Okay, so you got it sorted out. That's
So
good.
don't make the same mistake as me. Don't go 4 years with bits of itching and burning, letting it get worse and worse and worse to the point where you can't sit and then you end up in an existential crisis.
Yeah,
That can
because
be avoided.
yeah, and it doesn't get better. And I know that I had a friend just recently, and I think she might have a bit of prolapse. And so I said, I don't know, but didn't you get a prescription for vaginal estrogen? Why don't you just try it? She's like, but it's up high. And I'm like, look, I don't know what's going on, but and then she said she started feeling better. We're always thinking it's something else. That's one of the confusing things about perimenopause, I think, because you're always sort of like, your mind's like, "Boo, boo, boo, what is it?" So I'm glad you got
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I'm glad you got that sorted. And that's good for people to hear. Okay, so how did it go horribly wrong? I know every journalist is going to ask you that, but how did it?
God, it's a big question because like you were saying, back in 2018, 2019, it literally was a grassroots around kitchen tables campaign. There was Diane Danzebrink, who I feature quite often in the book, who started a thing called Menopause Support after her horrendous surgical menopause, where she was literally plunged into it, became suicidal because nobody told her that she actually needed HRT, nearly killed herself, finally got the HRT, and then decided that nothing should be this way. So she was one of the first ones, and there are a few others there that I name in the book. And after a while, then other doctors started talking about it as well, and then the celebrities came in, and we were all gathering at Westminster and holding our placards, "Make menopause matter," and all of those sorts of things. And there were government reports, and in the beginning, it was all very sort of collegiate. But after a while, it started to split. There were camps set up, and this group was this group, and these people were these people. And then there was the rise of the medical influencer, and I know we all hate that word. I hate it when somebody calls me an influencer. And sometimes they started to say things that were a little bit off piste. And the establishment, the sort of menopause societies, were sort of sitting back and watching all of this, but not saying anything for a very long time. And by that time, these medical influencers had become really popular, had huge followings. And so when they started to fight back, there was a lot of anger. And people were sort of saying, well, that's not what this person's saying. How on earth can they be wrong? They've got 2 million followers or hundreds of thousands of followers. So what they're saying must be true. And people who put their head above the parapet were often sort of cut off quite nastily. And because as we know, social media can be a particularly unfriendly place sometimes. So I was looking at that because I guess I look at it slightly differently being a journalist. So I sort of took a step back and I thought, okay, there's a change in the landscape here. What does it mean? And in many ways, that's what the book is looking at. It's sort of saying, okay, we got to this point because horses were allowed to bolt and then it was too late. And so people started to fight. But what does that then mean in terms of trust to the medical system? Because if you're being told, and literally I have seen lately doctors saying what your doctor doesn't want you to know, which is just extraordinary. They're the gatekeepers, they're keeping information from you. If we're at that kind of situation, then we lose trust in the system that has been set up really to safeguard us against predatory practices and poor practices. So we're in a kind of difficult situation. So that's what the premise of it was, to look at how we got here and why it mattered, why it then matters to our long-term health, because we pay an awful lot of attention to perimenopause, but not so much attention to those silent changes that happen when we go through menopause, like the changes to blood pressure and cholesterol, triglycerides, bones, that end up seeing us, spend 25% more time in poor health than men do. And then also to advocate for better systems, because menopause is under researched. It's massive. It attracts 0.3% of the funding in the UK. We're underrepresented in studies of conditions that affect us more than men do. We've got a huge health and data gap, and we need that changed. So that's what the book's really looking at.
You know the feeling when you tried all your health trends, but you're still tired, foggy, or just not yourself? It's not your fault. True health starts deeper at the cellular level. Enter the first ever longevity gummies powered by MitoPure. They're the only clinically proven urothalin A gummies designed to recharge your cells, boost energy, and help you feel strong and vibrant from the inside out. They taste great. I've tried them. They're vegan and clean. And MitoPure's own testing shows they can add up to 12% more muscle strength in just 16 weeks. It's like giving your body a daily cellular tune-up. If you want to feel energized now and as you age, click the link to timeline.com in the show notes and use my code HOTFLASH for 20% off your first order. That's timeline.com and code HOTFLASH for 20% off your first order. Your cells will thank you. Well,
In a
it's
nutshell.
funny. In a nutshell. It's funny because I started to think, I was all gung ho and I was following all these doctors, and then I just started to think, this doesn't feel very care. And then I started to think, they are doctors, and I'm sure they're careful in their medical setting, but they haven't been trained in how to relay information responsibly. And I feel like there was a bit of audience capture that's gone on. And then I started to see people be, yeah, just sort of going way beyond. And I started to think, I wish these doctors, someone was watching them on social media for the claims that they're making. Like they have a license to practice medicine, and I wish that they had a license to be on social media, because I don't know whether you've noticed that people just hanging on everything they say, and if you say something contradictory, they'll just tag that. If I say something contradictory in my comments, like the truth, they'll just tag one of those doctors. Like one of those doctors is going to come over and correct me. Like one doctor could have all the information about everything. I kind of wondered what you thought about all that.
Yeah, I think it's the cherry picking that gets me more than anything else. It's
Explain that for
the
people, what your perception of it is.
yeah. Well, I guess a good example of it, this is when, a study comes out and it often these studies are often very long and they're quite difficult to interpret in many times. And, they'll cite a lot of other stuff from other studies in them, to frame the argument. And then they'll put their sort of results saying we found this, and this. And they might find something a little bit unusual or something that's interesting, but it's not enough for them to actually put that in the abstract or in the conclusion to say that it should be recommended. So people will often go in, they'll go, aha, look at that point in that study. I'm going to take that bit out and I'm going to push that because that backs what I'm saying. But the whole study itself doesn't. So I think a classic example of that was at the FDA when one of the doctors was talking about testosterone post-surgery. And the study itself recommended against testosterone being used as an aid post-surgery. But there was literally, and it said, an ad hoc finding in there that inner people, I can't remember what the exact numbers were, didn't need a cane if they'd been on testosterone 6 weeks after the operation. But the study overall found against recommending testosterone for post-surgery recovery. So this person picked that out and then put it up as fact. And then when was challenged on it, said, well, the outcome, what they were looking at in the study was wrong anyway. They should have been looking at what this ad hoc thing was finding. So the sort of bending of data to fit your own narrative. And if it doesn't, then say, well, what the study was looking at wasn't correct. So I don't know, it's a bit messy in that respect. But I think the other one that really strikes me is heart disease. They claimed that HRT will prevent heart disease and it should be part of primary prevention because there was a study that found that there was a 50% reduction in heart attacks in people who were taking HRT. That 50% was the difference between, I can't remember exactly, but 0.1 and 0.7%. So yes, in theory, it was 50%, but the numbers were absolutely tiny. And then to hold that up and go, hey, 50% reduction in heart attack, when we're saying on the other hand, that the WHI, which was incorrectly interpreted and whatever, with their 26% increase in breast cancer was wrong. But you're doing exactly the same because that was like a difference between a 0.2 and a 0.26 or something, which was a 26% increase. So mathematically, it's the same thing, but the numbers are really tiny.
Yeah.
And that's what the difference is. And that's it's a way of using data to back an argument, but it's really blowing that argument out of proportion. And I think Pauline Mackey states it really well in the book when I'm talking to her about dementia and the same thing. And she says, literally, do you know how many people we need to treat to avoid one case of Alzheimer's or dementia with HRT? We need to treat 2,400, and only one person will end up avoiding Alzheimer's or dementia. So basically 2,300 people, 2003, how many did I say? 2004? Yeah, 2004. So 2003 people are taking it for that reason and getting no benefit from it. So
I'm so glad you brought this up.
There's a lot of maths in there that does my head in, but it's one of those things where you have to be able to sort of really look at the studies and understand them, and that's why we need plain language summaries of these studies so people can actually go and check themselves and find out what they said without having to read through hundreds of statistics and hazard ratios and things that just make you want to you blow your own head off.
Well, I think this is a problem across. I'm so glad you brought this up. I feel like this is a problem across social media that people think that when someone's reporting that study about heart disease, that me sitting here now with 100, whatever percent chance I have of getting heart disease, that I am cutting it in half. And it's the difference between absolute risk reduction, which is the most correct way to describe it, and relative risk, which is the percentage versus the actual little fraction. And then you also need number needed to treat. And if women knew that, like the way people are talking about hormone therapy prevents dementia, I know people who are going on it just for that reason. And so you talked about the cherry picking within studies, and then there's also cherry picking of studies because, the Lancet Commission on Dementia came out and looked at hormone therapy for the first time and did not recommend it. And I didn't see that anywhere. I don't see, it's like crickets. Like you just like a couple of news outlets cover it. So I feel like thank you. And then the fact that people who criticize the Women's Health Initiative for using relative risk will then
And
use
then
relative risk.
doing exactly the same thing.
It's
Yeah,
crazy. It's
it's
like, but
astounding.
gosh, this is so hard to explain to people. I've had a Instagram carousel ready to go for so long, and then I just keep fiddling with it because I'm like, is anyone going to understand what the heck I'm talking about? How is the average woman supposed to ever navigate this?
Oh, I know it's not easy, and especially the maths is not my strong point.
Oh,
Even though yeah. So to go back and look at all of these things, I in the end I took it out and I said, somebody just please check my maths
yeah.
because yeah, because it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain things like 10,000 person years and things like that in plain English. It's they're not easy to get across concepts.
After all of your research, knowing what the guiding bodies say, knowing how annoyed the doctors who love to promote hormone therapy get at the guiding bodies for perhaps being too cautious, but they're based on the data. What is your belief about what hormone therapy should and shouldn't be used for?
I think if you have bothersome symptoms, I hate that word, bothersome
Yeah.
symptoms. I have railed against it, but I just find it every so often it slips out. If you have symptoms that are impacting on your quality of life and they're worrying you, then I think go and get them checked. I think also there are the groups that we probably need to, as Pauline Mackey and Mike McClung say, he's the guy who worked with the WHO on the FRAX score, is that we need to
That's the
identify
bone
those.
score. That's the
Yeah,
bone.
yeah, we need to be identifying those who are at greatest risk. So with dementia, Pauline is basically saying we should be looking at the people who have the untreated vasomotor symptoms, high blood pressure, poorly controlled blood pressure, high cholesterol, and sleep apnea. So if you're snoring, and so if somebody tells you you're snoring, don't take it as an insult, go get it checked, because she says that they're the sorts of things that we're seeing as causing hyperintensities in the brain that are probably going to predispose us more to dementia or Alzheimer's later on. So that's where she's going. She's saying, find those people, make sure if you've got your vasomotor symptoms, if you've got them, that you're getting them well treated and all of those other things. And for bones, Mike is basically saying, when we come into the late the late perimenopause and menopause, the first couple of years afterwards, that's when we lose up to 20% of the bone density. So we need to know who's coming into that with an already low score. And if we can pinpoint them, then we can get them the right treatment. So they're not osteoporotic at 60, 65. And we're, in the end, we're saving an awful lot of pain and an awful lot of money to the system if we can actually find the right people and get them to target the right treatments that they need.
And you bring up a good point too about all this focus on perimenopause and hormones and perimenopause, but talk to me about there's not that much data on perimenopause. Can you talk about your understanding of yeah.
Do you want me to put the dog away?
No, it's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's fine. I didn't hear him.
Sorry.
No, don't traumatize him further.
Yeah, sorry for some unknown reason. My husband let her out. I think that basically we actually want to ask that again because it went in one ear and out the other with the dog barking.
Oh, the focus on perimenopause and hormones in early perimenopause, and then the gap in the actual data in perimenopause and how most of it's focused on postmenopause.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of the studies are done on people in postmenopause, but what we're not really looking at are those silent changes, and they're the ones that affect us for the rest of the rest of our lives and put us into 25% less or 25% longer of poor health than our male counterparts. So I think we have this sort of thing where you're sort of like, okay, well, you've gone through menopause and it's all over and you'll be fine in a couple of years. Yeah, a few of you might have a few hot sweats that last a bit longer, but actually that's the rest of your life. So we probably really need to start thinking about it slightly differently, because if we've got those things happening and we're not paying enough attention to them, we are going to end up in poorer health. So that's what I'd like people to start thinking about a bit more. Especially when it comes to things like, say, vaginal health and that kind of stuff, those symptoms aren't going away and they're going to get worse without treatment. As we've seen, vaginal estrogen is a really, really good way of reducing UTIs. And as Rachel Rubin in the States says, UTIs cause sepsis, so women can die from this. So it's cheap and easy. So it's one of those things that you think, why is it so hard to get? And if you look at the prescribing data here in the UK, HRT is up here, yet as we know, only 60% of women are going to have either moderate or severe symptoms, but 90% of people are going to have those vaginal symptoms. But yet the prescribing rate is way down here. So it's just we're not getting enough of that message out to people that there's something that's cheap and easy to use that can really be quite helpful. Yeah, I think it's just a different way of looking at it. And I run a thing called the Menopause Research and Education Fund, which is a charity that's aimed to raise money to get more money, raise money for research, and also to lobby to the government to make sure that it actually allocates more money for it. And we're doing a survey at the moment, but it's interesting because I did one on my own a couple of years back, and it correlates quite well so far when I'm looking at the results, that a huge number of women are having painful sex after menopause. I mean, literally 70 to 80% of them are saying, who are still having sex, are saying that it's painful. And you just think, why? Why are we going through this when it's so easily solved? Lie back and think of England and have a couple of glasses of wine is not a solution to a problem that could easily be solved with a bit of vaginal estrogen. So we have a long way to go, a lot of work to do in that respect. And I know people just don't think, the sex doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to die from having a sore vagina or whatever, but they could die from sepsis. But relationships fall apart. They're taking that to work with them. It puts a lot of, as I went through, it's a lot of psychological, almost grief that you go through, this sort of stuff. So it's a lot more than a little bit of dryness.
Oh, it's a lot more. It seems like we're in this weird place where there's this huge narrative for hormone therapy. You must have it to get through menopause. You're not going to be, you're not going to be able to be an old, happy, healthy lady without it. But then there's this huge gap where there's all these people who aren't getting the hormone therapy that they might need to deal with their symptoms. Do you notice that? Like, what do you think of that if you notice it?
I still hear it a lot. Yeah, I still hear a lot of the myths with people coming back saying, oh, my doctor told me I was too young, I was too old, I couldn't start because I was, too far away from my last menopause. I have to come off it because I'm over 60. I have to come off it because I've been on it for more than 5 years. So all of these sorts of things are still out there, which just reinforces the need for having a mandatory catch-up on what is now the latest evidence. And of course, these things change all the time too. Evidence is a moving thing as new stuff comes to light. But the other thing too about evidence is that I should have mentioned before was the difference between a systematic review and the findings of an observational review. I mean, yes, we'll say, look at this study. It looks at 1.4 million people's records or however many, and it shows that this causes that. Well, it doesn't show it causes. It shows there's a possible correlation. It's a starting point to go off and then look at, because you don't have all of the confounding factors in that observational study. You just, it's exactly as like, my mother used to say that everybody who's eaten a carrot has got cancer, but carrots don't cause cancer. So it's one of those sorts of things. You can have two very common things running in parallel, but it doesn't mean that they cause each other. And that's something that I think people also have a grave amount of difficulty understanding.
Did you know I also have a Substack? That's just a fancy way of saying I have a newsletter. But listen, it's not like every other newsletter. I am the only journalist in the world who's made menopause my beat. And each week I share research, news, products, tips, and tricks from the world of menopause and midlife. Sometimes I even write an essay. Hotflash Inc. on Substack is where I pull together everything that's here and in the menosphere, and I break it down just for you, so that we can try and make sense of it all and figure out what to do together in real time. Join more than 5,000 women, practitioners, CEOs, and more, and become a subscriber today. You can get my podcast as well as special video and audio drops you can't get anywhere else. Sign up today at hotflashinc.substack.
Have you know one thing that bugs me and that I'm just going to share? It feels like there's a conflation between surgical menopause and regular menopause. And these have kind of, so when I hear a lot of doctors talking about the benefits of estrogen only therapy as though it would apply to all women. And when I talk to my friends, people don't know the things that we know. They don't know that if you don't have a uterus, you don't need to take progesterone. You only need to take estrogen. You just hear, oh, estrogen only, and this, again, a great percentage of a good benefit from a study. Do you notice this as well? Like, do you have any thoughts about that?
I noticed a lot of stuff, women basically saying, especially from the survey that Diane did a little while ago on post-surgical menopause and the information that people were given, that's Diane Danzenbrink's survey, that they were saying that, once again, a huge number of them were given absolutely no advice. They weren't told
Crazy.
anything about any type of HRT.
That's crazy.
With
Still now.
yeah, they were I can't remember the exact numbers, but they were frightening. It was like, wow, like the majority of them were walking out of having had the surgery with no information and no
Ugh.
follow-up and no care, and the GPs, they're not experts in surgical menopause, so they were literally left on their own, fending for themselves, wondering why they were feeling so incredibly dreadful. The progesterone without a uterus is an interesting one. I think there are some people, again, we need a lot more studies on this, but there are some people who say they benefit from mood and other sorts of things from it, but I don't know how much we know really about it. And there are some doctors who are happy to give it to them and some that aren't, because they say, well, you haven't got a uterus, you don't need it. But some people do find they benefit from it for mood and for sleep.
It does feel weird that you would walk in with both of those hormones pumping and then you would leave and you would only need one of them. It just, like, I don't know. A lot of times when I get confused, I just think, what makes the most sense? But as we know, that
Yeah.
isn't always true. So you looked at
Yeah,
a lot
it's
of new,
interesting because I mean, I guess that comes down to the fact that, there are a million and one ways to go through menopause, and even those who will go through surgical menopause are obviously not all going to experience it the same way. We are, it's one of those fickle sort of unique things, and we all need to be treated in some ways as, individuals. So we need our doctors to be well educated and understand that it's not a one size fits all approach as well.
yeah. So you really dove into the new research. Like we were talking about bone before we started recording, what really struck you about what we're just learning and what we don't know?
God, so much really, but the bones really did. I had no idea that they were so metabolically active, that they actually form part of the whole sort of, the hormone regulatory system, and then the blood sugar metabolism and equalization. Basically, if you've got good healthy muscles and good healthy bones, your blood sugar regulation is going to be so much better than if you don't have good muscles and good bones. And when I went through university, bones literally held you up, walked you around, helped you breathe, and that was pretty much about the only, and a bit of function in blood cell production. But other than that, we didn't have a clue that they had all of this sort of metabolic role to play as well. So it was that was a steep learning curve in a very short period of time, because, as I mentioned to you before, I was not given a long time to write the book. So 10 weeks, it was like a chapter a week. So my head was just literally going, yeah, it was steep.
Yeah, that's a crazy amount of time to write a book. I can't believe you did it. What is the average woman supposed to do in this space where there's so many gaps? I just think, whoever you can get an appointment with, you're going to go down that road in treatment, whether they want to give you hormone therapy, they don't want to give you hormone therapy, whether they're a naturopathic doctor who is more going to do a bioidentical compounded route, or there's someone who doesn't believe in it, as my OBGYN is like the most scaredy cat in the entire world. What is your advice for women to just try and navigate this? And
Yeah, it's a difficult one because people, they say, by the way, the I don't believe in it. I've heard that a few times, and it's sort of like, I don't care what you do or don't believe in. I really don't. I'd like you to go on evidence-based guidelines. Thank you very
Mm.
much. It's like saying I'm not going to give you the pill because I don't believe in contraception, or I'm not going to give you an abortion because I don't believe in reproductive rights. I don't care what you believe in. I really don't. What I really care about is that you follow evidence-based medicine for my particular circumstances. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm getting angrier and angrier these days at this kind of stuff, though. You know, women are literally under attack, and we need to fight back on multiple fronts. So how to navigate this one, though, is a very difficult one, because when people say, "Oh, just go and do your own homework and your own research," well, again, you know, we know that we know that not everybody's capable of evaluating things equally, so they may not necessarily get the right advice, or they might be listening to the wrong people. And this is across any medical sphere, really, especially if you're looking at AI. Please don't rely on AI to give you the right information, because it's wrong consistently, especially when it comes to menopause. So it's a difficult one. Yes, do the best you can to find out as much information as you can. Try and find somebody who is in the UK a BMS accredited menopause specialist if you can, or in your general practice who has at least an interest in women's health would be good. Same in the States or in Australia. There's the AMS in the Australasian region, I think, has a list of practitioners. The Menopause Society in North America has a list of practitioners. So try and find somebody who's at least qualified in the area. And we need to advocate then just for better systems in general, in terms of if we have a democratization of information that, as I mentioned before, is clear and easy for everybody to understand, and then it's much easier for us to say, okay, you know, this is the route I want to take. These are the options I want to consider, because it is shared care. That's really what it comes down to. It's you and your practitioner making decisions based on your individual needs in a shared manner. So, you know, don't think that you're not part of that conversation, because you are part of that conversation. And if it doesn't sound right, ask to see somebody else or be referred on.
In your experience looking at all of this, what research do you think is most pressing? I mean, you founded the research organization and you have some really cool partners and some of the most reasonable and informed people, like Dr. Vikram Talalekar, who's on my expert panel. I just adored my conversation with him. But what do you think is the most pressing for women right now?
God, that's a really hard one, aren't there? Because there are just so many. Yeah, actually, I was talking to Vikram about this the other day. I'd really personally like to see heart disease, the inoka, anoka, and minoka, the small blood vessel diseases. If we're talking about prevention, are they making a difference to those? Because that, in theory, is where you'd like to see it done. I'd also like to see, because you know you can't have a conversation with me without having multiple discussions about vaginas in it. Is there a correlation between those small heart diseases and vaginal atrophy? Because again, it's one of those things where lack of blood supply comes in. So is this the equivalent of an erectile dysfunction in men, so to speak? Is this one of the first signs that you're increasing risk of heart disease? Just putting it out there as a left of field thought. And then, of course, we just need way more on the dementia. We need way more on testosterone. I'm loving what Susan Davis is doing in Australia at the moment, looking at that whole sort of midlife span and where the symptoms start, and then, you know, trying to tease out which ones are actually related to menopause and which ones are just life in general, because it may not necessarily be, especially when we look at the workplace, it might not necessarily be that she's a menopausal woman, we need to support her. It might actually just be a confluence of events again, where we are this sandwich generation. Hormones play a part of it for some of us, but then again, the rest of us have got aging parents, we've got teenagers at home, we've got, you know, jobs, we've got, you know, we're struggling to make enough money to keep the lights on. So there's a lot of pressures on women. So is it necessarily that it's a menopause thing, or is this a midlife thing? And, you know, we need support because we've just got too much on the plate for a period of time. I
It's
don't know. There are different ways of looking at things.
I love that about the small vessels and the vagina. I have a friend who's a dietitian, Marianne Jacobson, and she has a Substack. She's obsessed with the small vessels, and she thinks that it's
Oh, is she?
yeah, she is, and she's always talking about it and how it's overlooked. It frustrates her the most because this is, I think, where our heart problems lie more when it comes to women. And again, it's this thing where these really bothersome symptoms might not just be bothersome symptoms. Like they might be indicators. We now know that about hot flashes. Well, it's so interesting to think that vagina stuff. Because why does one person have it and one person doesn't, right? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I interviewed a doctor once. He passed away. He was in Arizona, and he said that almost half of the people who would come to him with really bad problems, vagina problems during menopause and perimenopause, when he would clear up their gut health, they would get better. And I've never heard anyone say that, but I feel like myself, there's a correlation between how my gut's doing and how my vagina's doing.
Oh, I guess I wonder then whether or not it's the the whole probiotic thing.
Yeah.
We know that's another area that we know so little
Yeah.
about the microbiomes. That needs huge investigation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all,
Yeah, and also there's that gut estrogen axis and things
yeah.
like that. There's a lot of stuff out there that really needs to be looked at. It's
What's
an
your
infinite pot.
It's an infinite pot. Yeah. And I think the International Menopause Society last year said, we need this certain research to say these things. We don't have it. We're probably not going to get it in our lifetime, right? We're not going to get this kind of gold standard definitive stuff that we need. So we're kind of like just soldiering on in the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah, and and that's things could be worse. I guess it's you can only do the best you can with the evidence that you've got. And I understand women's frustration, especially, as I talk about in the book, the testosterone argument in particular is one that gets very, very fractious with people saying, well, it worked for me and my brain fog was gone. And how can you possibly say that it doesn't build muscle and bone? I feel like I've got so much more energy and I'm way less tired now. Your studies are just crap and you need to do better ones. And they got really nasty in this with some of the researchers, which was like, wow, okay. So I mean, I do understand the frustration. Research does take time, and if you go down the wrong route, and I'm not saying that testosterone is or isn't in any way particularly harmful, but if you look at history, when we've given things like thalidomide to people, and it caused a lot of birth defects and things like that, this is why we have research in the end, because when you do get it wrong, things can be catastrophic. So I understand urging on the side of caution, and I understand that there's also an incredibly high placebo effect with testosterone. But you don't shoot the messenger really, because these people are doing the best that they possibly can to come up with as good a research as they can to make everybody safe and healthy.
Yeah, Susan Davis, I mean, she's doing incredible work. She's been doing clinical studies for over 20 years. And I was talking to a doctor who said she's such a hater. I thought, hater. Like I don't know what I just didn't know what to say. I just nodded, but I thought that's not how I would describe what she's doing as being a hater.
No, I just think that she doesn't she wants the evidence out. That's
Yeah.
really, she doesn't like seeing things misinterpreted, and because the evidence isn't there to back them. And if it was something else that caused bigger issues, then there'd be an enormous outcry. But I guess in the end, we don't know whether or not we've got I guess what's almost like an experiment now going on, where we've got women in their 30s here as well now saying that they think that their anxiety or their brain fog or whatever is caused by early menopause when when they're not diagnosed with early menopause, and asking for HRT. So if you've got people then who are taking hormone replacement and for instead of what's normally been studied, which was 5 years, now 10 if we're lucky, and you've got them taking it for 20 years or whatever, we don't know what that means, and that it's a big experiment. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, there are hormones and we're just replacing them, so therefore they must be safe. But if you take too much thyroxine, you're in trouble. So
Yeah.
it's, I don't know,
Yeah.
we've got to be cautious before jumping in boots and all, I think.
Yeah, and these things don't show up until large masses of people take them, right? So that's another thing.
Yeah.
It's like you said you're kind of like an experiment. So speaking of that, I have to ask you about GLP-1s. I saw someone sent me a video today of a doctor in the US partnering with a big hormone therapy company saying she thinks every woman should be on GLP-1s, at least microdosing them because of the metabolic issues that are brought up in, the vulnerabilities that we experience in perimenopause. Do you have any thoughts about the GLP-1 push craze? Did
I
you?
need to know more about it. I can understand, I suppose, where she's coming from with all of those people sort of saying, look, I've got much better bloods and I've got much better this and I've got much better that since I've been on them. But I also, the thing is not the drug that's done that, is the fact that they're eating less and they're probably eating less crap. My husband started on Mounjaro about 5-6 weeks ago, and I've lost 2.5 kilos as a result because neither of us are eating as much. Yeah, we're not sitting down before dinner and sucking down a packet of cashews or whatever we were doing before. We're not having a bucket of cheese afterwards. So both of us have actually lost weight. So it's not because of the drug per se, is because you've changed your diet. Now, all of the tests that have been done long term, as far as I understand it, I may be completely wrong, but as far as I understand, have been done on people with diabetes. And that's where it's showing the benefit. So if we're giving it to a whole bunch of people who are just literally taking it because it's going to offset a bad diet, then we don't really know what the long-term effects of that would be either. So I don't know. I need to know more.
Yeah, no, I need to know way more. I do know a prominent doctor who said, and one of the people that's like sort of
I mean, remember they said the same about metformin about 20 years ago. Everybody should be taking metformin, and they didn't follow through with it.
Well, so this doctor was saying, in my practice, I'm using hormone therapy. It's helping women with their weight and their metabolism. And then she said, actually, now, I'm open to new research. So now I think the stack is adding a GLP-1, and quoted, I got this in a newsletter, and quoted a study and didn't say anything about the size of the study. The study has 16 people in it. I mean,
oh, wow.
Right. And so it's like, that's the tiniest amount of data you could have. And a huge doctor saying, oh, I got this new information. I'm really open to new information. And I don't know. One thing I want to ask you is about how these narratives are crafted. Like, as a veteran journalist, you've been on the other side, and I don't know that people really understand how these things happen. We're like PR, crafting stories that get passed down, that get in the news, that get now to influencers who need content. And I just wondered if you could tell me your experience with that.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, this is just on a slightly different sort of area, but I have been. I don't normally put nasty comments on people's things, but I have been putting nasty comments on this ad for every time I see it on my feed. There is a man who is selling cheat sheets for hormones for personal trainers, with the thing basically saying, if you're literally using the word, if you're too lazy to go and do a course and you want to cheat so you can answer questions when your clients ask you about hormone therapy and cortisol and brain changes at menopause and all of these sorts of things, you can pay X amount per month and you can white label all of my AI generated content. And I've just gone, I am so sorry. This is just massively unethical. Either go and do a course, go and do a medical course, because you shouldn't be giving people on advice in the first place. You are a personal trainer. Seriously, you're there to make sure I don't get injured in a gym and that I'm exercising properly. Beginning and end of the story. You are not there to advise me on my menopause. Yeah, so I was just furious with that. The crafting of the narrative, I don't know. I don't know how many of them have I don't think in the beginning there was crafting. I think what was the message for menopause was that it just, for the first time, women felt that they were being listened to. I think that's why it sort of suddenly took off so much, that there was somebody out there who really understood what they were going through, instead of having been dismissed as being, hysterical or it's all in their head or just told, well, put up with it. This is what you're going to go through. So I think in the beginning, it wasn't necessarily that it was about crafting a message. I think it was about people finding a sympathetic ear and being understood. But now it has obviously become a lot slicker, and there are a lot more products that are being sold, and there's a lot more selling of the quick solution. And it is a gold rush. I mean, just outside of what's happening on the medical sphere and the supplements and the nutritional stuff and the menopause diets and God only knows what else. It just doesn't end. I don't know if you've seen here they have a tick that products can buy, and then they will be stocked in an M-tick shelf with a big tick on their product saying that they're suitable for menopause. And somebody posted a picture of the magazine that arrived in with their shopping yesterday that had pictures of razors,
I saw that.
toothpaste. Yeah. I mean, can you please tell me how that specifically benefits a menopausal person? What criteria and what evidence, apart from paying for a tick, did you require for this? Is it literally 8 out of 10 cats said this was a great product? Because if it is, that's not evidence.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's just
that is
not
a very
evidence.
interesting evolution of that organization. And because when I saw that organization launch, it was during the time when we were just so excited about everything getting attention. And I thought I would love to have an aisle or a section in the store where I could go and get stuff for menopause. I still think that's great. But then
Yes,
to see that it morphed into, because you pay a lot to get that tick, and that's
you
their
do,
revenue
anywhere between
model.
£5,000 and £25,000, I think,
Right.
depending on the
So
size of your company.
that's the point where you start as a company going like, should we take this money for this product? Will this, and the person who's posting about it on Instagram is hilarious, is just raging and raging, and it's really funny. We all have
Yes,
our little things
it,
that just make us mental, but that makes me sort of, what's the worst
I
menopause?
don't mind if the product is good, if it has
Yeah,
evidence
same.
behind it, if it's
We
actually going
need
to
them.
work,
Yeah.
then then signposting to things that are good is a great thing. But signposting to, to a razor with a moisturized strip, well, I mean, as far as I know, all razors have moisturized strips on them, so I really can't see why this one in particular is for a menopausal person. It literally, it's just, are you serious? Yeah.
Have you seen very helpful products? Is there anything that you've used that would that you would recommend?
I take my vitamin D supplement. That's it.
I was like, is she thinking of more things?
That was, I'm thinking, is there anything else? No, not really. I know some people. The other thing, the Epsom salts. I mean, for God's sake,
Mm.
seriously, on that page was a picture of for everybody as
Yeah,
well.
they
If
are
you've
for
got muscle aches or
everybody at
joint
every
aches, they're
age.
for everybody. They're not Epsom salts
Everybody,
specifically formulated for
oh,
menopausal women.
but they're so much better. The foot soak is so much more necessary when your hormones are in flux, Fiona.
Yep, soak away, but don't just say it's for menopausal women.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just,
Has
I just beg
have you
it.
seen other products that have just made you go like, I'm really raging about protein? I saw this product, protein water, which just feels like I don't know how that can
Protein
work.
water.
Protein water. And my brain went right away, oh, great. That would be great. I like, because right away, this is how your brain works, right? You're like, oh gosh, I know I need to be eating more protein. And wouldn't it be great? I love water. And wouldn't this just be so easy? And then you sort of start looking into, well, that just doesn't seem like that would be as nutritious as actual food. But anyway, are there any products that you've seen that have just sort of like
In my mind, I'm trying to think, if this is clear, how did they dissolve all of the peptides into it
yes,
that would make it a
a
protein?
complete protein that your body would
Yeah,
use? I
yeah.
looked into it
Maybe they
minimally.
have.
I'm not going to rely on that for my personal. But are there any products like that that you, not like that, but that you found particularly insulting?
I think the magnets. I mean, really.
Magnets.
I mean, you get a hands-free shopping experience. I guess that's about it when the supermarket trolley clips to your magnet.
Mhm.
But other than that, I can't really see any benefit of a magnet. But if people believe in these things, and in the end, it's your money. Spend it where you want, as long as it does no harm. I don't really care. But
So
also, just make sure if you are taking things that your doctor knows, because quite often they have interactions, and also make sure that they're good quality products, because sometimes they have high levels of contaminants and stuff in them. So yeah, you've got to be careful of where you're buying them from and what's in them, and also don't double dose on everything. I mean, when you look at what people have got, they've got their multivitamin, then they've got their B vitamin, then they've got this one that's got this, and then they've got this one that's got this. And you look at on the back of all of them, and do you know how much you're actually taking of this? It's way beyond what you should be. And some of them you may just pee out, but others are fat soluble. You're going to store them, and if you have things like too much vitamin D, it can actually be bad for your bones, not good for it. So you have to. I don't know. I always think food first, really. Have a good diet. And the protein is important, but I think, we've got to this point now. We obsess over absolutely everything. Just eat a good balanced diet. Very few of us are actually protein deficient, unless you're a vegan or a vegetarian or you have some sort of absorptive issue. The chances of us really being protein deficient are fairly slim.
Well, this is another kind of area where you have women in their 50s who've decided to get really jacked, right? Like they've started working out, they've gotten, and then that's a market. So I feel like a lot of this protein is sort of like targeting that. And I've been saying lately, like most of us are not athletes. I'm not an athlete. I don't need to use my body to sell anything. I just need to be strong and content and mobile. And so I feel like you can get those messages can be kind of like, well, maybe if a person is becoming like doing a cut or whatever the language is when you are when you're training and getting like chiseled, it's like targeting them, but then the message goes to everyone. And I just don't think any of us need to be eating like 150 grams of protein a day. It feels like it might not work in your body. I don't know.
We lurch between keto to Atkins to, God, we like to lurch following. I've never been a really big trend follower. It takes a lot to convince me to follow anything. I'm really boring. I pretty much stick to what my mother used to say to me, which is all things in moderation, really. Have a balanced, sensible diet. I'm just really boring. I am the most boring person on earth.
Well, it doesn't, then you won't have much content to go on about the little layers and, I just feel like people are skipping the basics because the hacks
Yes.
and the extras are so much more interesting to talk about. And it's,
But what I guess what really does, and excuse me for getting a bit pissy here, what really pisses me off is when we have things like when I hear people saying, I don't give my children fruit anymore because it's going to spike their blood sugar levels. When we get into territory like that, I mean, it's like, fine, if you don't want to eat fruit and have all of those antioxidants and polyphenols and vitamins and fiber that come with fruit and vegetables, then that's your choice. But don't do that to your children because they need vitamins, minerals, and all of the things, the fiber and everything that comes in fruit to grow and be healthy. So I make whatever decisions you want for yourself, but don't pass them over to other people. And your blood sugar is actually meant to spike. If that's what your body does when you eat food. So what the problem is when it's continuously up, that's when we have a problem. So that's when you really got to think, okay, I need to look at my diet.
yeah.
But having a couple of grapes and an apple and a banana is not going to ruin your health. That is not going to make you a diabetic person. It is not going to inflame your body full of inflammation. All of those nice antibiotics and vitamins and things, antioxidants and vitamins and things in there are actually going to reduce that inflammation. It's really important to eat a good balanced diet.
Well, this is what happens when people hone in on one biological process. I mean, you've got training in this, you went to university, but that's just like a misunderstanding when you isolate those biological processes. Like when people are talking about, oh my, I had pho last night. I couldn't believe how much my blood sugar spiked. And it's like to avoid those meals, the body is meant to handle all that. It's meant to handle all that. We get a little bit, it's a little bit harder as we go through these hormonal changes. But like you said, we're not meant to cut them out. I feel like cutting all that stuff out would make you have metabolic problems over the long term. And there are people talking about that. Like there are people healing their metabolisms by incorporating some sugar back in.
Yeah. But I guess the irony of it is, if we look at, we spend a lot of time looking at the blue zones where people live longest in the world. They eat fruit and vegetables. Japan, Italy.
Yeah.
They eat a lot of fruit and veggies. And so, there's, oh my God, if you eat an avocado, you'll be dead tomorrow. So no, really, you won't. Yeah, all things in moderation.
What's your take on
We're just stressing ourselves out
yeah.
over things that really should not be stressed on.
Have you got
To
any
make other people money when they sell their books.
1000%, 1000%. Have you got any thoughts about the role of trauma and unprocessed emotions? And because I've started to realize that maybe what we bring to perimenopause might almost be as important as the hormones that change during perimenopause. Like I know there's not that much information or data about, but there is some about adverse childhood experiences, sexual assault, socioeconomic disparities, racial weathering, all of these things can contribute to worse a worse perimenopause and menopause experience. So I don't know. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, it's true, actually. Yeah, and you're right. Again, we don't have enough data there, but it does show that people who've been through, domestic violence or childhood abuse and those sort of things do tend to have a worse menopause. And I guess it'd be very, very interesting to find out why and how. And the acceptance, though, of that is it's an interesting one, which I also look at it in the book, is when it comes to adverse drug reactions. And it basically says, oh, well, of course, women are going to have more adverse drug reactions because they're more likely to have depression and chronic diseases and all of these sorts of things. Plus, they're victims of domestic abuse and they're more likely to live in poverty. And so, like, well, that's the explanation. But, why are we accepting this? Why are we accepting that domestic violence and living in poverty is a reasonable explanation? We need to start changing those things so we are not living in poverty and we're not living in domestic violence. So we have less depression, we have less trauma, and we're on less chronic, medications for chronic illnesses for such a long period of time. So yes, I'd like to reframe the argument a little bit to look at that at how do we solve the underlying problem rather than accepting that that's a reason for the problem.
Yeah. Okay, so please tell me a little bit more about your research foundation and what you're looking at and how it operates.
Early days, very early days. We got our charity status a bit over a year ago. So what we do at the moment is we do evidence-based education courses for healthcare and allied healthcare professionals a couple of times a year. So that's sort of how we're funding ourselves at the moment. But that is not nearly enough to be able to actually fund good studies, which is horrible because I keep on getting these emails saying, I've got this fantastic study. Would you be able to give us any money? And I'm going, I really wish I could at this stage, but unfortunately I can't because we just don't have enough. Because it costs a lot. I mean, even to fund a researcher for a year is around about 50K. It's quite a lot of money. So it's not cheap to do these things. But basically the aim is once we get our act together, is that we will have enough money so people can actually come to us and say, this is our study, and it will go through a peer review process like the NIHR does, or we'll be able to work with other organisations to help get funding for those studies, plus advocate then for that 0.3% that the government gives to the NIHR to be upped to 3% at least and ring fenced. So we're not asking for new money, just that they ring fence a reasonable amount of money to look into some of these things that we've talked about on course earlier. Because at the moment, out of the I went back through to 1993 when they were set up until January this year, and they'd funded about 8,500 or so studies. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but literally 33 of them mention the word menopause over that period of time and that number of studies. That's how little was done. So we need an awful lot more.
Yeah, that's a big job, Fiona, that you've taken on.
Yeah, yeah. I've realised I was the weakest link, and plus, writing has taken literally most of this year away from it. You start this thing, and then I sort of end off down another rabbit hole. So it's been massively ignored. But I now have a group of non-executive directors who I hope are going to help me take this to a reasonable level. Because I am the weakest link. I'm not good at asking for money. I'm very good at getting people together. I'm very good at disseminating information and those sorts of things, but I'm not good at asking for money.
Okay, well, I think it's such a worthy goal. I'm really impressed that you did it, and congratulations on the book. That's very needed. We have a lot of books telling us, the guide to menopause. There's a lot of books like that, and they're good. But looking at this issue, it's tricky. You're really sticking your neck out, and I give you a lot of credit for that because I know how it feels.
Yeah, it is. I think it is different. It's not your usual menopause book, and it does have, all of the information about menopause in it as well, but just not set out in that sort of guide way.
Yeah.
But it is political, and I do think that it's time we got angry. We deserve better.
Yeah, and as a journalist, you're looking at the information in a way that you're not coming at it with the medical bias, with your medical training bias. You're coming at it from, just like moderate, and that's really needed too. So thank you so much for talking about it. Meno Wars, get it up those. You were in the Independent, get it right up those. Drive it up to the top of those lists. Amazing. I really love the cover too.
Yes.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful colors.
Oh, thank you. I did argue with them over it. I wanted one solid color, but in the end, I understood their logic of dividing it into two.
Yeah.
So.
Well done. Thank you so much.
Hotflash Inc. was created and is hosted by Ann Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Ann Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hotflash Inc. Media.